Welcome everyone to this very special book club meetup. My name is David. I am joined by Gabe. Say hi, Gabe.
Hello.
And Cap. Say hi, Cap.
Howdy.
And we are here tonight to discuss a very special book called Mixtape Hyperborea, the most recent addition to the Lit canon, which came out in, I believe, spring of 2023. So this book just came out a couple months ago. I can't recall the exact month, but anyway, we're gathered tonight to discuss it. I think we all have a drink in hand. I have a Sprite and vodka twist. Sorry, Sprite and vodka with a lime twist in hand. Well, what are you guys drinking tonight?
Water. A half bottle of like a week-old alkaline water. 95% pH levels. Nice.
I'm drinking a small brewed American lager whose name I can't say without revealing the city I live in.
Without self-doxing, huh?
Without self-doxing. I avoid it.
Yeah, I think we've all had enough of that. And yeah, we have this book, Mixtape Hyperborea, which I'm going to try not to trip on the name of it. So far, we've all read at least halfway through, and Cap has read all the way. I've read just a pinch past the halfway point. There's a nice intermission, actually, at the middle. Comes in about 230 pages. It's a little bit deceptive, though, because those pages, I'd say it's an extremely breezy read for a few reasons I'll get into later. But before I dive into any of my thoughts or any of the details and specifics, let's first define what is Mixtape Hyperborea. And Gabe, I'd like to start with you, if I could put you in the hot seat. When you think of Mixtape Hyperborea, what is it to you?
Well, that's actually a good question, because when you read this, obviously, I saw some people comparing it to like works of Bret Easton Ellis, Less Than Zero, his college novels, right? Like him just talking about his life as a child, as a teenager. So when I read this, obviously it is about Adam's like high school years. It's either partly fiction, partly documentary. We all know how this goes, right? So I thought, okay, is this going just to be like a nostalgia fest? Is it going to be decadent? Is this going to be kind of him just trying to relive the glory days or aestheticize the glory days, like a pure romantic work? But when you kind of read into it, especially with the mixtape, like when you look at the name and you look at the recursions, right? The recursions at the beginning of the novel, the theme of recursiveness, almost like a spiral, a thing that curls into itself. You kind of realize that it goes just beyond nostalgia bait. For me, I think that it goes into the name. What Mixtape Hyperborea is to me is a playlist of what, in every true sense of the word, it's a collection of true nerve pulses of music recurling into the self, and kind of going beyond the self into the collective unconscious. A very pretentious way of saying it's a good book, basically.
How about you, Cap?
I mean, if you want a little less soulful rendition of what I feel like it is, I mean, so it's a high school bildungsroman, right? So it's a coming of age novel, basically, and it has the gimmick, obviously, which I guess we haven't mentioned yet. So the gimmick is that there is a mixtape, which is on the back page, and there are several chapters that are named after the songs on the mixtape, and you're sort of encouraged to listen to that music during your read, which obviously very unusual, and I was skeptical, and I don't normally listen to music when I read. I did do that. And I found it to be pretty enhancing.
Agreed.
And I did, I tried to, at the beginning of it, I was trying to read sort of just putting the song on repeat for the chapters that share the name. And I think that might not actually be the intent, but I went ahead and did it that way, and I felt like it usually referred to the song in the subsequent chapter. So you had just finished listening to it for one or two repetitions, and it was fresh in your mind, and so you knew what what was being talked about. Like very directly, you knew what was being talked about when referencing the feel of the song. And so I thought that was a good way to transport the reader into the headspace of the narrator.
Do you both listen to the soundtrack in sequence the whole way through?
I've tried my best to follow, like, I guess, quote unquote, the rules he set out during his little intermission period in the first page or so, where, you know, as soon as the song lyric is referenced, you know, in italics, you put the song on. And so I try to do it, I guess, as intended. And well, I would do it with the song on first, because what I thought he was doing, right, was he kind of wants you to get the most emotional impact, right, to get like full immersive experience, right? Because this is kind of like a intertextual novel kind of thing, something you kind of have to feel out. So a lot of the times, if I play the music first and then reread the chapter without the music and try to like compare experiences, so I'll try to almost reread it twice in that kind of sense, to double back and try to feel how the prose is by itself and how the prose is purposely constructed to be with the music, you know?
Yeah, I didn't. I did not follow the soundtrack rules. For the first chapter I did, and I did really enjoy it. I found it, yeah, stressful in terms of like, do I repeat the song? Do I switch to the next song? And then also, I just have a small brain. I can't focus and have music on when I'm reading. Yeah, so I found it distracting. Which is just to me, that's a personal taste thing. Which I didn't find it a negative at all. Sometimes the lyrics are referenced in italics in the middle of a chapter or something, like as you're following along. So I just kind of would skim over it. It does have kind of a reference to what's happening, but I didn't find it negative. I think it's, to me, having done it that way, I think you can safely not follow the rules, but I do think it's probably worth it for someone that is able to focus on two things at once.
Well, actually, I think that's almost partly kind of the point, because the whole, I guess we're not going to do the whole themes yet, but a part of the theme is kind of memory and willing to let go, or in the moment, clouds evaporating, or, the passage of time, experiencing a moment, but not hoarding that moment. The catchphrase of the novel is like, I'm in no rush. The beginning sets us up, the phrase and the sentiment of like, I'm in no rush, the passage of time, and willing not to like hoard time, but let it experience and soak and let the mind forget about it, but almost the body doesn't. So the idea of getting distracted by the music, especially when you read the first chapter, the opening sentiment, it kind of curls into the point, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And for me, I didn't mention my own sort of interpretation of it, but it was, definitely for me, it was very nostalgic, because I would say I'm in the core demo of people that I was definitely not this person, but I was in high school sort of at this time period, and some of the references were very obviously things that I kind of experienced, the time period I experienced. And to me, it was really up to the first half, at least. I haven't read the second half all the way through. A lot of it seemed like a reflection on sort of life in the school system, life as a teen. There's some quasi stream of consciousness bits that were really, really things I could relate to. So for example, one that jumps out to me, there's the comment where he mentions, "Oh, I think my arms are bigger." Like he's been exercising kind of for the first time, or working out his way, and that's to me that was like such a teen thought. There's like a dick comment, like, "Oh, I think my dick grew overnight," which is awesome.
Those early chapters are great.
Teenager. Yeah, it was so great, and I would say my absolute favorite part so far was start to the build up to a little after probably the sleepover. To me, that whole part is pure gold. And so relatable. For you guys, I guess any highlight sections I guess you guys want to cover, and obviously we're getting into spoilers now. So actually, before we go into spoilers, if anyone, since we'll probably post this, I would just say, to me, I give this a recommendation for folks that are interested. There might be some like qualifiers, things if you want to listen on and risk it, but I would say it's interesting and it's well written. So I don't know if you guys have any anything for anyone that wants to bow out now?
Cap?
Well, I mean, I would say one thing that I found really impressive is that, despite it being, pretty romantic, there were several things that were written in a very naturalistic way, I felt. Like the way that male friendships work, where they're kind of surface level hostile, where where the people who you're closest to, you will just constantly give shit to them, right? Mm-hmm. So the protagonist and his best friend are constantly calling each other like sticks and shit, and they're that's something that I feel like gets missed a lot in mainstream novels. People don't write friends the way that male friendships actually occur.
Oh, that's absolutely 100% true. That's one of the big part is the naturalism of the relationships. Like you, 100%. I relate. I'm a Zoomer, right? And so I was basically infant for all intents and purposes during this period. But for some reason, it feels like it skipped a generation where I felt these are definitely my friends, my people, my humor. You know what I mean? It does have that classic, where he's from. You can, if you're in our group or in the 4chan or, right kind of thing, you will like the humor. But it doesn't go off you like pornographic, kind of like harassment architecture. I mean, there's pornographic elements, obviously, right? The most humorous parts are sexual. But unlike harassment architecture, instead of just trying to say edgy shit and try to rap soliloquies about it, and try to be all pretentious about it. Here it was a genuine, just, there is something sincere about it. The best part of this book is its sincerity, right? It has a deep meaning. It has some things to say. It's not just a nostalgia fest, but it wears its heart on its sleeve. It doesn't do like the meta irony thing, or at least not anything to an excessive, pretentious degree. It wears its heart on its sleeve, but it still does it in an extremely sincere way. And it's extremely, for me, it's exceedingly funny. Like, I have not laughed out loud in a book for a long time. Like, and at least not like the books recently, but out of all the self-pub books in our scene, like, not even from like an edgy 4chan way, but in a genuine laughing out loud in like the cafe, that this book has achieved that for me. Chapter 12 is one of the most funniest chapters I've read in a long time, actually.
What was that?
Chapter 12.
Remember? Yeah, what was the tub subject?
You remember, it was the toilet paper incident. He tried to sleep with his, tried to put a move on his woman. Yeah, you remember that?
The phrase is in my mind still. The shrapnel of jerking off, or whatever it was. Yeah,
that's the thing. It's like that is so relatable. Like he's a master of dialogue. Like that scene is so believable, right? It portrays that relationship perfectly because we've all, all who've had relationships are kind of like that, where you're horny and like she isn't, and it's just like. He's not trying to be a dick. He's a bit of a spastic, but he's not necessarily trying to be a dick. He's just kind of zoned out. And so he jerks off while she goes away, and she comes back, and she's horny now. And she gets pissed off, because, like, again, for the woman, it's much more of an emotional, kind of like a being with you thing. And for him, it was just pure, almost mechanical. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And here's the meaning part. When he goes into... when he watches the TV, right? And like there's a like reality seeps in, because I think it was about the news about an immigrant attack, right? And that was right around the time, early 2000s, that was happening. And then him cooking, right? And you see the eggs dissolving at the end, right? So it mixes high and lows. Like that scene is pure comedy, right? You can just take it off as a pure comedic scene, but there's still bits and pieces, like the egg at the end of the chapter, where it still hits home, like, hey, there's still a nerve that's being punched here. This is not just a funny bone being tickled,
I do. Well, actually, Cap, maybe you can spoil us on this a little bit. That was my one concern. Is there a payoff for the Mr. Andrews, Mrs. I can't remember her name. It starts with a W.
Oh yeah, the counselor who's shit at marriage.
Yeah, Mrs. Williams or whatever her name is.
Yeah, there's. I think it's ended really well.
You said it again.
Find a payoff as, but I think you ought to read it.
Okay. No, just ask, because that was my only concern was about what that would pay off.
the last 30 pages are just him coming on her tits like 10 times. Like three pages, change position. And actually, that's the part of the book that is related to Eminem's Stan. So it gets really weird right there. But, you know.
You have me intrigued now. Hopefully there's more dick
shrapnel. That was a lie, so I hope you're satisfied with what actually
that really was a perfect term, shrapnel. Because that blew up his chances, actually. So that was actually a perfect term.
Yeah, I've totally never been there before, so I can't relate. But it was an interesting section. Never. No, I don't do that. Definitely not.
That scene was too relatable, man. Honestly,
you will touch a dick when you get married and jack off your husband on your wedding night.
You'll have to deal with it. So I had a couple other like key bits that really jumped. I mean, the whole sleepover. That whole part to me that was primo. The one part that was weird was the jerk off. Again, focusing on the sex stuff. The jerk off session, which is like quietly mentioned in one sentence. It's like we all jerked off in the corner in different corners. I never had that at a sleepover, but the rest of it I did experience.
I did that when I was 12.
No, you went through some lame sleepovers, my friend.
Yeah, I didn't miss the jerk off sesh.
Just jacking it with the bros, man.
No, I had friends that would tell me like that they did it at a different one, and I'd be, holy fuck, dude, what? Like, I know that happens. But I'm proud to say I dodged that bullet. What other things I want to call out here? I don't know. Do you guys have any other like sections that really jumped out to you in the first half? Sticking to the first half.
Well,
that you want to highlight
to keep on the theme of the sex parts. During the and also I'll do a non-sexual one afterwards. But I remember that time when they're in the classroom and they're talking about doing a quote, I believe an Eiffel Tower on the girl, and one of them was high. Yeah, I remember that one.
Yes.
And like they take the note. The teacher takes the note, he hides it, one of them eats it, and then they have to actually leave and do like the fire drill, right? And then again, that scene is absolutely hilarious, right? Pure like peak stone, like Animal House stoner comedy, right? But then he balances the highs and lows, right? Because he sees like the middle schoolers coming out, and the catchphrase, I'm in no rush, peels in back into again, because he has like that, like a David Foster Wallace stoner high enlightenment moment, when he's like, "Yo, I was young too. Like, I was their age once, Like, it's both, like, it's supposed to be, like, oddly entertaining and stupid, but it's actually a deeply profound thought if you looked through unironically, right? He realizes that, people age. Just 5 seconds ago, I was their age, and now I'm here. The whole point of the novel is, like, a comedic look at growing up. That's the whole point of the nostalgia of a mixtape,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the mixtape is a good lens to look at it through, because one thing I meant to mention is structurally it's pretty interesting, because you have these chapters, which I don't know the exact word count. I would guess they're like 1 to 1.5K words typically. They're like short, like a little longer than like a flash fic. Like generally pretty, to me they feel like a short chapter. Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it. 5-minute read. It's got a picture at the top. A third of the lines are like 4 words. He loves the 4-word like little abbreviated thing. So it flies. It's very, very quick, very brief. The point of view shifts. I should have mentioned this earlier. You have a main first person point of view, and then you shift to third for Mr. Anderson, and you have a Josh chapter randomly. And so it shifts around a little bit. So again, a little bit mixtape like in terms of the timeline will jump, the character will jump a bit between. I think there's only those 3, right? Does there one for Mrs. Williams? Oh, there's one for Mr. The guy that you have the shrapnel dick. So,
Will Berry. His name is Will Berry.
Thank you, Will. Yeah, the Berry. Yeah, that's Berry's the last name. Mrs. Berry and Will Berry. And so, yeah, there is like a mixtape element to the way it shifts between them. I didn't find it awkward at all shifting between the viewpoints or the, different POV style of writing.
Yeah, he does it very fluidly, very fluidly.
Yeah, like a good mixtape. you can have kind of somewhat incoherent different songs, but if they kind of jive together in a like a stylistic way, then it makes sense.
Yeah. Like for me, one of the best parts of this novel is actually the structure, right? Because all the chapters are short, right? Like again, like a song. Like what is a mix? Like if you're going to do like the whole Nabokovian postmodern thing, right? It's structured like a mixtape. All the chapters are named after songs or sound like song titles. Each one of them are really short. Some can be read in 3 to 5 minutes or 7 minutes. Yet again, like a song, and almost can be almost read in almost any order in a lot of ways, right? Because you have this structural order, right? Because in a mix, again, the mix.
There's definitely some of them could be interspersed in some areas, but there is an overall.
Well, yeah, no, there's an overall hyperstructure, right? There is a hyperstructure, but what I'm saying is after you experience the hyperstructure, right? Because it's supposed to be a sense of playfulness. Like when you're a writer and you intentionally like layer on an outer source music, you gotta have a sense of like, okay, I know I'm purposely allowing the reader to have their attention split, right? Because I know for a fact, like, at least people who try to read this are not going to spend 100 time of their percent actually absorbing the prose, right? Because human brain doesn't work like that, you know what I mean? The background music is going to fuck with you at least a little bit when paying attention to the prose. So he's going for almost a vibe sense, you know what I mean? So I'm not saying he doesn't care about the prose, he obviously does, right? The dialogue is golden, good prose, snappy, everything, right? But he's going on for a feeling and a mood, I guess it's cliche to say, an experience, right? So he wants you to get hooked on like the mood of the chapter, and then when he introduces the musical element, the music kind of carries you on the rest of the way. So there's a hyperstructure to it, but there's also a sense of you can take it apart and experience each of the pieces a little bit differently and how to your liking, kind of thing.
The mood thing definitely hit for me with some of the references. Yeah, and the sense of place was really good. The one that had me like almost on the floor was the eBay sword the guy had.
Yeah,
I'll just say I had an eBay sword as a weeb teen, and some of those references are just like gold, which does confuse me. And I will mention this. So we're planning to have a separate chat with Adam at some point. We'll do like a Q&A, so we're not going to mention it now or discuss it now, but I want to ask him why he set the book at this period, because I'm pretty sure, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he's a little bit younger than me, or more than a couple of years younger than me, and so he was actually not in this grade at this year. Was it 2007, 2008, I believe? He's sort of entering senior year in the book.
This was the last opportunity, basically, for a physical mixtape to make any sense. This was the last opportunity, just technologically.
Okay, so that's the logic.
I mean, I'm not speaking for him, but I did think of that at the time.
The last hurrah, the Don Quixote kind of thing. The last hurrah, the particular romantic era.
People obviously still make playlists, but I don't think it's not the same thing.
Yeah. And notice the word difference. Playlist, again, a playlist is very associated with a digital format. Well, mixtape, you know what I mean? A playlist and mixtape, it's an analog. It's a pure analog term.
Yeah. It has to be physical media, right? Like, he was burning CDs, of course, but, you wouldn't call it a mixtape if it wasn't on physical media.
No, I have distinct memories of giving a girl a mixtape, and it was the thing. It was like part of the without even knowing what you're doing. It was part of this weird courtship process that existed then, and it just doesn't exist now.
Yeah, nowadays you would not be like, oh yeah, I made this playlist on Spotify and made it public. You should,
Yeah, I'll DM you.
I'll DM you the link. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
that's gonna work.
Yeah. Spotify is the only fanization of like this thing that he's trying to like do an OVAD to, Like the mixtape was a purely personal one-to-one. A, you have to at least assume the girl likes the same music as you. B, you kind of construct a narrative.
No, that's the gambit. That's the gambit, man.
Yeah, there was a risk to it, right? Exactly, right? And he talks about that scene with the professor or like the comedian scene where that was the first time of quote unquote like pseudo cancel culture. Remember that scene with the lecture where they
Oh
yeah, I remember that, and he even talks about
Which
it's kind
one
of
is this?
yeah,
The 9/11 one?
I think so. Right, and this whole concept of having this digital thing, right? If because he even talks about this where how do I say this? Where basically you gotta have to learn to let these moments go, right? The concept of a camera is it like the concept of a camera basically it holds your image, it holds this moment forever, but in a kind of sense it sterilizes it, right? With a mixtape, right, you give this mixtape to a girl, right, it's going to degrade, she's going to lose it, you know what I mean? But in that moment, if it works, if the gamut pays off, right, it's a both high highs and low lows, right? If it works off, it's gonna she'll end up being your wife, it will actually hit off, or the sex will be great, whatever, right? It's a deeply Eros thing where she will realize, oh shit, you paid so much attention to me. It's a private, it's only between the two individuals, right? Well, this digitalization of the moment, right? This is almost the theme of the whole book, is basically having these intimate moments in life, and kind of he plays it both ways where, these moments will fade, you can soak in the nostalgia of it, but the part of the nostalgia is kind of letting these moments fade away, at least out of the conscious part of your brain, right? So with a playlist, it's almost pornographic. It's almost living in a house made of glass, Hey, I made this song, a bunch of music for my girlfriend. And you're not making it for her, you're also making it to be witnessed. You know what I mean? You're like, hey, I got this for my girlfriend. I made this for you. You can post on your Instagram, You're partly almost like you're peacocking, basically. You're doing it partly for her, but also partly to do it for, hey, everyone, I'm doing this for her. You know what I mean? It's almost like doing it in third person rather than one-to-one.
Yeah. Well, the perfect balance of familiar, but also new. That's the
one good question.
You got to show off the taste.
Right. And one good question I would have about this novel is like, what do you think his before we have the QA with him? It would kind of be interesting, like to us to have our thoughts about it before asking him. What do you think his relationship with the nostalgia is?
Well, so this sort of dovetails. I think implicit in the novel is the fact that this time is gone. And right. I think that's the way that I understand the title. Basically, it's like a forgotten golden age. Because there's no like the title of this book, the Hyperborean side of it. There's nothing that is literally Hyperborean.
Right. There's no schizo edits in this fucking book.
Yeah, there's no schizoid edits, and Gabe, you mentioned, you said that this was like sort of online right wing ish. Even though the with the association of Hyperborea and all that, I really don't think there's anything like. I don't think there's any like political tone to this.
Oh no! I meant purely for the humor and the dialogue, and there's no way in hell.
Oh, that it's not overly sensitive. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
it's the blunt honesty, and there's a few references to like two I can think of, like comments on utopian visions. Like there's a reference in the team projects how one person always takes the lead and does 80% of the work, which is totally authentic and I would agree. To me, I would agree and say it's right wing quote unquote in the sense it doesn't bow any pieties or liberal pieties in particular.
Right. Through sheer Overton window, the same way like
I would say I think this is center left for the time period that is in the novel.
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
You know what I mean? So like that was the ethics of the time period. Like this would not be reactionary ethics for 15 years ago.
2007. Yeah.
So,
yeah, this is pure Bret Easton Ellis. Like it's the same as Ellis. There's nothing in his works, in Ellis's works, where he's right wing, but due to A, American Psycho, and B, the time and Overton window, Cthulhu always swims left. It just the times made them right wing. They themselves were not right wing.
I mean, that Asian accent humiliation ritual was, a little intense in terms of like frequency.
White people, it's fine.
Hey, it's a very inclusive novel, all right? It's inclusive.
Yeah,
everyone
that was
gets
funny.
everyone gets a lick in this novel, all right?
Now, to me, I found it super relatable because again, I went to high school in a pretty libtard area, but like me and my friends, it was just you're kind of in a prison system, and so like most of my friends were not white people, but
Right.
like there was like a very like there was like a bluntness and a humor that I saw in this. It was like pretty relatable. Like it wasn't. I don't think I did an Asian imitation accent for like 30 lines of dialogue or talk back and forth straight, but it was like, that was the kind of shit talk you did. And it was back then you could do it, and people like it was just fun. But you're right. Just the way that Overton window shifts, it makes it more. It's quote unquote right wing. I would just say it's sort of like reflecting the reality of the time and I guess like a natural order.
It's natural. The writing was natural. It was naturalistic.
Right.
It's the way that people actually talk.
Yeah, he doesn't compromise his own self-experiences for, like, a modern audience. Like, the way, they'll forgive me, this is going to be cringe, like John Green, like, he doesn't fault in the stars of his own life, you know what I mean? He doesn't turn into a YA novel of where he takes the bits of his life, pretties them up in his own ideology, and then it kind of puts it for a Zoomer audience, or like a woke millennial audience, or anything like that, It's 100% raw as is. This is the closest thing you can have to a picture of this man's life, or the way he intensely remembers it in an embodied sense,
Are you admitting to reading Fault in Our Stars?
Oh, well, God, no.
I was gonna let you. I was just gonna let you
listen.
Take that out.
No. Okay, I have an excuse. All right, I've seen a film. I seen the film with a woman in the area. All right, I have no choice in the matter.
Wait. Hold on. That was phrased very specifically. You've seen that film when there was a woman nearby?
Yes, within the structure, like
with you.
Yes, we were both in.
Need money for them movie programs.
Yes, things were done. Things were done.
You had a transaction.
Yes, and I have to say, it was not worth it. It was not. It was not worth the green.
I've done worse things. I won't judge you. I wanted to cover too the main character and get your guys' thoughts on. So it's like we're talking about. There's I guess 4 point of view ish characters. There's the I, who I don't think he's ever named. Is he named?
I don't think so.
Yeah. There's the I. There's Mr. Barry, who gets 1 chapter. There's Josh, who gets 1 chapter. And there's Mr. Andrews, who I think it's like 2 chapters in the first half, and he gets more in the. I know he gets more in the second half, from what I've read already. And like the second chapter he's in ends with he stepped outside, got hit by a car, which is hilarious. So there's those 4 ones, but I would say ratio-wise, the I feels like he gets 70% or so of the word count of the first half. How do you guys feel about the I? Because I do have I would say one of my beefs and my only reluctance picking this up was I found the main protagonist a little bit annoying in terms of his lack of people pushing back against him. It felt like he was a little bit of he could just kind of fly through everything and kind of a douche, which I think probably is partly on purpose. But I'm curious your guys' thoughts on the I.
Are you accusing Dear Adam of being a Gary Stu right now? Is that what you're doing right now?
No. I don't think. To me, I see the I as partly inspired by himself, but not literally himself.
Right.
And so I don't see. To me, it's more just this is definitely solidly in character. This is autobiographical in spirit, and like it was the era. But like I said, I think he's a little younger, so I don't think he actually lived during this exact era. Which is fine, but I'm viewing him just as purely as a character, the I, and maybe Adam's still a douche nozzle. I'm willing to accept that I enjoy his book, and I would like hate him if we ever met up and talked. I can live with that Adam separation.
X has entered the chat.
Yeah, fight me, bro. 1v1 me.
We can stream.
What do you guys? Did it cause any issue for you guys, or did you have any thoughts about the I?
No, I mean. Teenagers are little shits. Like they'll wax poetic and then like get completely distracted by like girl thighs.
Yeah, it's the Holden Caulfield effect, right?
Yeah.
Half the people like he's literally me, and half of them hate them. That's a problem when you try to like accurately portray like pretentious dudes accurately in a novel. You get the catch in the rye thing where people have the most intense feelings about this poor character, either extreme hate or extreme love, and I admire that. That's kind of the whole point. Is just when you're a teenager, your emotions, your views, everything is raw. You're not a completely socialized individual yet, so either opinions, you're either going to be 100% cringe or 100%, out there. But 100% this is how they're actually feeling for the time. They're an exposed nerve for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, I like that description. I would agree with that. It's one of those, I didn't find it. It didn't make me put it down, but definitely his personality, the personality I was abrasive, and I felt like there was a gap in logic in terms of pushback against him. Felt like he could just like smirk through every situation with minimal pushback. Which, to be fair, I mean, in school you actually really there's not a lot of pushback on a lot of stuff you do. It's a lot of it's just mental. But that was one of the few things I would say that like kept me from reading as fast as I probably would have otherwise. Was just a little bit off put from that personality, which is again that's like a stylistic thing. Let's not say it's wrong. The other point of views, I like them. I'm trying to think. The Josh one felt a little bit. Cap, can you tell me? Does Josh ever come back as his own sort of lead in a chapter?
I do not believe so. No.
Okay, yeah, that seems a little like an odd. That was actually my one. If I was beta reading this, what I would have suggested is make that chapter into an I chapter, because it was really humanizing. Because he was trying to like jerk off, and he was like hating himself for his bestial teenager stuff overwhelming his morality, and he jerked off. This post-nut clarity, and like, to me that was humanizing. It's like, all right, you're not just this like smirking, oh hey Mr. Smith, oh I just laughed at your 9/11 dead cousin, oh I get 1 day of detention, fuck you. It was like, oh, I'm struggling with something, which, not to say every protagonist has to be weak and a pussy or whatever, but there was, to me that would have been like even stronger as an I chapter. Josh is Josh, he's the friend. So anyway, that stood out to me, that Josh chapter, and to me, like, why wouldn't that be an I chapter? Maybe it's like an embarrassment thing. Not, I want to admit you have jerked off in a public bathroom. I can relate to that to some extent. I haven't actually done that.
While reading it, in order to really immerse myself in the novel.
Yeah, exactly. It's extra immersive that way.
Yeah.
Why would you have lotion in a public bathroom, though? I have seen it. I know it's a real thing, but why?
Let's be considerate.
The book even says hilariously, chronically dry, like chronically dehydrated.
Hey, you know what? Some people have been. Some males have been genital mutilated due to the vast conspiracy called male circumcision.
Oh.
So those poor mangled fellows need lotion, sometimes just to pee.
Listen, the lotion is their reparations. That's the closest thing to reparations to ever get.
Circumcision reparations. That's why it's there.
Yeah.
There's
no 4 acres and a mule. You get 4 squirts and a pair.
Part of the Americans with Disabilities Act, but it's rarely enforced.
All right, I don't know. I think those are the key things I wanted to cover. Do you guys have anything else? I guess like key characters, turning points in the first half that you wanted to make sure we covered in this first part?
Well, one part, to go back to his romanticist thing, when you look at the 2 first chapters, right, where he talks about making a mixtape, being on the road, he does it a sort of spoof of King Jamesian, Lord hath gave me a vehicle, Lord gave us a rear view mirror, right? And the first chapter basically ends in that rear view mirror point where he looks back at the rear view mirror. And there's that great line. Yet again, he's very almost Hunter S. Thompson, right? He has wonderful like one-line bangers. He's like, I made many wrong turns in my life, but I've never made a wrong mixtape. Which it is a banger line within the context of the novel, right? And chapter 2 opens up with him looking at Minerva's head, right? So I look into that, and I'm doing my usual like close reading thing, like, oh, okay, that's kind of there's where the recursion begins, right? Where time kind of curls. right? Because you have him looking at rearview mirror, which is memory, and looking back at Minerva's head. Minerva, obviously the Greek goddess of memory, right? So you double the memory theme back up. And then you have the classic transcendentalist motto, which is, what is it? Ens unum vernum bonum, which is like unity, truth, and goodness, right? And you see this, he's clearly aping back to almost like a classical sense. Because he even mentions, I believe, in the Eiffel Tower scene, right before they do, yet again, the classic combination of highs and lows, right? Like, the teacher actually brings up Harold Bloom. He kind of brings this up, right? So I have a sneaking suspicion that Adam is kind of well-versed in like his pseudo-Freudian, pseudo-Straussian, like esoteric views of the novel. Because he's not just trying out to, like I said earlier, like he's not just trying to go for like a, this is my high school era boomer moment, you know? He's actually trying to say something here, right? With all the sex stuff, with everything. It's like these peaks at 9/11, the humor, everything here is trying to go up to a certain point, a certain telos, right? Like, the sex stuff isn't just boomer raunchy comedy, or the relationships of the music, or everything like this is a, I guess I'll use a word I used earlier, exaltation. You know what I mean? It's an exaltation of a certain theological point.
This is a way better novel than Bronze Age mindset.
I'm sorry. Nope, you're just wrong, all right? It's the best fictional, like, E-Write novel, but it's not the best novel overall. It's second place to Bronze Age mindset, I'm sorry to say.
Oh my god. Yeah, we'll just have to disagree.
Right, and one way to ask a question about this is, how would y'all feel if the musical elements were removed? Could this novel have been played straight without the novel and still maintain its image or maintain the point, or would it truly lost something special about it?
Well, I mean, you're asking about the road not taken, so
right.
There's some difficulty there. I'm fairly confident that it would have been, that it was enhanced by it, but still would have been very good otherwise.
Yeah, because it's like with the whole like Nabokov thing, or like post-structuralist, right? Where, you know, if you read something like Pale Fire or Ulysses or something like that completely straight, it works mostly fine, right? But the music is an intrinsic part of the structure of the novel. You know what I mean? The novel is not something to be experienced. It's not harassment architecture, right? There's nothing really special being played, because you made this comparison to harassment architecture, which is, it's just pure edgecore, almost a self-fellatio. With here, mixtape is, like, again, it's almost an analog sense. You're supposed to play with the mixtape. You know, you're supposed to kind of have a weird, the structural relationship the reader has to the novel itself is almost a textual kind of relationship. You know, yet again, you know, he even says, listen to music while you read this. You know, you have these songs playing when you read these certain chapters. You kind of have to, it's a physical relationship with the novel more than just receiving information. You have to have a dialectic with the novel. Or almost.
I mean, also just in a more baseline logistical sense, he does actually talk about the songs.
Yeah, every time.
They are direct. I mean, they're diegetic in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, if a person has no frame of reference, right? So you could ask the same question of, you are reading a highly elusive piece of text. If you don't get the illusions, are you suffering for that? And yeah, obviously. So I would say in that sense, yes, someone who has listened to the songs does have an enhanced experience,
and who has an association with it, because that's the other thing. If you know, these are old songs, so you know, I believe they're all relatively of the era too.
Right.
I might not 100%, but
no. Some of these are much older than the era.
Okay, good. Okay, but they're all they would have been present, so it's like authentic.
Not anachronisms. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the word. Thank you. To me, like I said, I didn't listen long to the songs. I thought it was a cool inclusion. It would make a pretty badass audiobook, actually, if you could have that like playing low in the background and someone reading over it with it playing. That I would enjoy. I found it slightly irritating because there is a consequence of having it be in the pages itself and having the references. If I already know what the song is, it's like a really minor hiccup in terms of flow, especially if you're already listening to the song. So there's a little bit of that gap there of like an awkwardness because it's like you're making a multimedia product at that point where it's both textual and you have audio, and then you're assuming the reader will be in a position to play audio at the time that they're reading,
Right.
which is not something all of us can do.
Very privileged. Some people are deaf.
Yeah.
You fucking chuds.
Yeah, where's the Braille version of this, damn it?
For real. I like it though. To me, again, I wouldn't say it's a detraction to include it as is, to answer your question. There is a slight price. There is like a slight awkwardness to incorporating it if someone doesn't follow along like I did. That was, a really minor speed bump. But I guess that's probably why people don't do it often.
Well, you can actually turn it into like a positive if you take what I talk about the analog earlier, right? Which is the whole risk thing, right? If you hate this style of music, right, you're almost in a sense, because reason why he even made the mixtape format is he's trying to almost have a synthetic way of having a meta version of that relationship of you, the reader. He's giving this mixtape to you. You know what I mean? If you want to play it meta. Mm-hmm. These songs represent some deeply emotional, personal moments of both reflection in time and in personality of the main character, right? So when you are listening to his playlist, you're listening to pieces of him that he feels very exposed to and very embodied, right? And so if you hate that, it's yet again, you're put in that embodied sense of being handed this analog thing. So the very fact you don't know this music, you said, oh, if you don't like this music or don't know this music, it's a speed bump. Well, it's kind of it's even more immersive in that sense, where you kind of are put in either I know a lot about this character. Oh, he's an Eminem fan. Nirvana's Rape Me. The Flints, right? So either A, I can really relate to his character and his music taste and what he feels about his music, or I'm put at a distance from this character through his musical choices, and I kind of have to look at afar. But by playing around with the structure and actually kind of like, because he's a good enough dialogue author on his own. His dialogue is perfect. His characters are perfect. Technical writing is pretty damn solid. Probably one of the best top 3 lit authors. Even the top 2, probably. Let's be honest, right? So,
yeah.
And so even if you're put off again by the character, like you said, the main character's personality, if the humor is a little too edgy for you, or yet again you don't like the music, or you don't like the conceit of the mixtape, it's almost like I was merely pretending to be retarded. You could play it like that way where, the whole point of it being analog is that, yeah, you pay the price. Yeah, it's not a homogenized experience. It's a deeply personal experience. What mixtape, to answer your first question, right, which I answered way too, complicatedly, is Mixtape Hyperborea is a snapshot of an exposed nerve, right, in a person's time, right, in both pleasure and pain, right? It's an exposed nerve of one person's time, right, before it can heal, before everything. And you just have this one snapshot, and you're supposed to forget about it. And the whole point of the thing is, eventually it fades away. That's why I was afraid of this novel, is that the whole point of the novel was you're going to grow up, and the time and flow of time will fade away, but its effects will not leave you. You just got to remember to kind of feel it on your nerves. That's what I'd say kind of the whole point of the novel, or the theme of the novel is.
Yeah, it reminds me of, there's a quote I threw at Miles when we were talking a while back, the definition of art as someone asking the question of, do you see it? And to me, Mixtape Hyperborea, it really, really clearly, even if you think the main character is a douche and you don't like the music and the soundtrack, which I think is pretty banging actually, because I have listened to some of it, not while I read. It's really experiential, even if not perfectly pleasant, and you're like, yeah, I think this guy's kind of a douche, this pick is kind of whatever. It's really vivid in terms of like a time and a place.
Yeah, you're literally embodied into the moment. You're supposed to have an embodied experience reading this.
Yeah, and that's where I think that the music does pay off, even if you're not listening to it live. I do know, not all of them, but I knew a pretty good number of the songs just mentally. So I would read it and like clock it mentally. Okay, this is going on in the background. And if you if you don't, I don't think you're missing out. Like I said, there's like a really slight awkwardness there, but that's kind of like the price of admission to experimenting with the idea. So yeah, to me, it's worth it.
I have a
Absolutely.
question for you two, and then I'll say mine. Gabe, let's start with you. Where'd you go to high school?
Um,
What was it? What was it like? Did you go to private high school, public high school? You
partly
drive there, you drive the bus. What was that like?
Well, here's the thing. There's a sense of voyeurism for my ass, right? So partly private in the sense I spent like the first 14 years of my life homeschooled, actually. So a large part of this is partly voyeuristic for me. So I had bits and pieces of these activities, happen to me. I have experienced these kind of things. But for me at the time, it was like, for him, for most of y'all, it's like a train ride. You go from the station. It's a real experience. For me, it was just crashing into a wall. So for me, I can't say very much of fellow experience other than like, yeah, at this exact moment, this is exactly right. The stoners, the music, everything I experienced like a punch to the face when I was like 14 or 15. So I can't really say in terms, I'm an anomaly, right? So I can't really give enough of a point of view on that regard. For me, this is kind of voyeuristic in this sense.
Okay. How about you, David?
Yeah, I was public school top to bottom, so uh, yeah, so I could definitely relate to the high school scene. Well, to some extent. So his is a private Christian school, I believe. So I guess there's some gaps there actually. When I think about it because they talk about. I can't remember if there's any religious instruction, but there is like references to God and stuff, which obviously didn't happen in public school. The overall boredom and misery and stuff and all that's pretty universal, I think, in public-ish education. I would say it's like ethnically more of a white place than where I grew up. I don't know if they even say where it is. To me, it had a kind of a Colorado vibe. I don't know if that's something I picked up in the first chapter.
Well, they reference Carl's Juniors, right?
Is that set to a certain coast?
Yeah, that's the
I've never been to one.
American. Like you got to be Tennessee or south.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's definitely south.
Give myself away. Okay.
And it's got to be old south, so like it wouldn't be in Arizona or something like that. I don't think Carl's Jr. exists west of the Mississippi.
Yeah, I went to, I would say, was considered a pretty nice public high school, but it was not as nice at all as the school described there, because there was some elements we're talking about pillars and like lotion in the bathroom. Our public bathrooms, yeah, sure shit did not have lotion.
It was more in tune to the urban feel.
Yeah, we were. It was a nice area. It was a nice school, public school, but it was a public school. You were getting that state mandated. If anyone went to public school, they'll remember that shitty toilet paper that's single ply, made out of like cardboard pressed, God knows what, that they come out in like rolls that are as big as like, your chest. So the bathroom description kind of cracked me up because it was so extravagant and nice sounding compared to what we have. But yeah, how about you, Cap?
I went to a Catholic high school, so we had uniforms, blazers, mass once a month in school. So I was like the target audience for this book. I was 100% the market.
This was your literally me character.
This is close to my literally me. I lost my virginity in a staggeringly similar way. So it was yeah, it was eerie in fact to that point. I would say I may have gotten more out of this book than perhaps some other people who did not have the generally identical experiences to draw from.
Yeah, shut-in neats and incels will not experience this book very well.
Yes. People who are in their 30s and have never seen a boob are probably not going to understand because they haven't gone through their rites of passage yet.
Yeah, poor F. Gardner. Poor F. Gardner. He's not going to like this novel.
R.I.P.
There's no Pokemon at all. Do not read. Do not recommend.
There's no Pokemon in this book. Yeah, that's true. That's true. There's no there's no fandom at all. I mean, I don't even know what IP they were planning on hanging this one on.
Yeah, and there's no reference to Butterfly or Lit. I mean, how am I supposed to enjoy this novel?
Oh yeah, you're right. Do you mean, are you talking about a trip coder, or are you talking about?
I think you know what Butterfly I'm talking about here.
Okay.
Not the Weezer song, no.
Anything else you guys wanted to cover? Otherwise, we can do wrap up and talk about what we want to see in the second half for those that haven't read it.
Right. Well, I kind of wanted to read this excerpt I found on chapter 19 that I think really plays into the point of the novel, if y'all don't mind. It's chapter 19, Needle in the Hay. Right, he says this, right? He says, quote, "Music has no ego. It's happy to play in the background of long drives, workouts, and parties. It can even play in the background of a book, wink, wink. Like everything, it has an effect, like types of lighting, temperature, and color. It contributes to the way something feels and what something becomes. The wrong song played at a party almost causes social disruption. The right song playing on a commute dissolves any sense of stress. So every now and then, I put music front and center." And that's unquote. So you see in here, I think the entire philosophy of the novel can kind of seen, right? The whole point is an experience, right? Like light waves, temperature and color. Everything, all of these temperature, everything is in waves or like miniatures, right? It's not a solid experience. It's almost like a Gerder's theory of like light, or theory's light of color. You know, everything is in shades. Everything is I guess you can say a vibe. Everything is based on experience. It's a very anti-conscious novel in a sense. It's a very pro embodied experience novel, and you can, in this kind of way he used music is kind of, I think, if I'll ask him this in the Q&A, but I think this chapter is indicative of how he kind of views art in itself, kind of.
Yeah, that makes sense, and it's reflected in. There's a couple references to him pitying people who are like so trapped in the moment and their present anxiety that they can't fall into that. I don't know what you would call
overdosing like on awareness, kind of.
Yeah, overdosing on awareness. Like there's like a teacher. There's a few other references to that. Yeah, I'd agree with that point.
Yeah, I just thought it was quite a good excerpt to kind of describe in a pinch the kind of whole point of the novel. Do y'all have any good excerpts? Did y'all actually underline any excerpts or any kind of like good banger quotes? Or
I did not underline any excerpts.
I morally oppose that. Actually, I never underline anything in a book.
Oh yeah. You don't want to damage the poor thing, but like I don't know. He's very good at. His dialogue is god tier. I really, out of all of us, you know, I love Tales of the Unreal. I love our collection. It's great. It's everything. But his dialogue is truly one of the best of us.
I think he said that he was working on a Tales 2 submission.
Oh, he'd be great.
He was definitely doing something. He was definitely doing a short format something.
Right. You know, part of it is just jealous and envy. I'm horrible at dialogue. His dialogue is pitch perfect.
Yeah, same here. No, it was really, really solid. All right, and so two of us have read ahead a little bit. And Cap, I don't know if you want to. Yes, you can't participate in this, but the question of, you know, what do we want to see in the next half?
What see?
You want to see us? Yeah. What's the college years look like? What's Mixtape?
To be 7-year time skips.
That'd be pretty cool, actually. I'd love to read like a 2011. Oh wow, man! I'm a junior in college. What am I gonna do? Kind of read. Yeah, yo, Adam, submit to Tukey's. I'd like something like that.
Oh, that'd be great.
Actually, funny enough, I have something cooking like that right now. About the time I had to scrub vomit out of a bathtub. I won't spoil it, but it's a little bit inspired by Mixtape Hyperborea in terms of like, I was like, you know, I need to put this on paper because it was something that happened.
What a great topic of homage. You know, to one of our best writers in our community.
You inspired the story I read about
Yeah, it's 100% true. It was like scraping Chef Boyardee off of a off porcelain.
Oh,
But well, Gabe, you and me, it only applies to us. So, what are you looking forward to in the second half? What do you want to see? What do you not want to see?
well, I did a hard stop at chapter 20, right? But what I kind of want to see is a continuation of this kind of weird balancing act he's doing. Because, yet again, nostalgia is like a very, very big part. It's the whole point of the novel, right? And based on, I kind of looked into the future. I already skim read a little bit. So I feel pretty secure we're in good hands. I really trust Adam. Overall, based on what I've read so far, I just want to see him continue on where he's doing right now, basically. To keep it very vague, right? As I did read ahead a little bit, I'm just going to keep it very vague on your behalf.
Sounds good. And for me, I read like one or two chapters into the next half, but not a ton. And it's all making sense as next steps. And my only thing is I want to make sure that the Mr. Andrews thing pays off. Mr. Andrews' potential affair, which may end in like a crazy, elaborate whole chapter-long blowjob, which would be pretty sweet.
Hey, this novel can be enhanced with many blowjobs, and he will write it so well that it earns every blowjob he gets.
Yeah, very tastefully done, and really, really relatable with that shrapnel.
He really,
dick.
really just he reaches new heights of describing the flavor and texture of a penis. Like you've never seen anything written this way. It's almost like Bourdain-esque in terms of his ability to write about dicks as food. It's almost a travel log of a blowjob.
Cock as culinary subject. When I write an essay about this, I'll definitely put that as my header.
Hannibal Lecter-esque. And I guess what I really want to see more of is just that high school slice of life, if that's even the right word. Like the other thing I want to compliment him on was the character descriptions, because there's some sort of background characters that are really periphery, but they get really great like 1 or 2 line descriptors, and it's like, okay, I know this person, and then you spot them. It's the same group of like 5 or 6 misfits that you tend to see repeated in stories pretty conscientiously. And so all of those good. I guess I would like to see more of that. The classroom antics were super fun. Yeah, and to me, it's just, again, in terms of that time and place, I didn't go to that type of school, but just the general setting and the time period, it really captured it well. So hopefully more of that, but yeah, I feel similarly. I feel like I'm in safe hands. Second half is extra. I counted it earlier. I think it's only like 100 pages or so, whereas the first half is like 130.
So I'm not quite sure where you guys got to. Did you get to the party scene?
The blowjob party scene, that's the end of part 1. So I think if that's what you're talking about, then yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would be unfair to call it a blowjob party. I don't feel like that.
I think you're overhyping it a tad with that description.
The garbage fire party.
Engraved invitations to a blowjob party. I mean, I'd go, but there is another party scene later on that I think is extremely well done in its differences. So,
this is a tease.
Well, actually, Cap, if you want, we basically I stopped in chapter 26. Harad stopped in chapter 26. If you start an open mic night, you can kind of experience it again with us and see how, from your POV, since you already read the book, you can kind of see if the recursive element of experiencing it again kind of hits you different.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll freshen up before we do the whole Q&A with him. Because I'm really looking forward to the Q&A, actually. I have a lot of questions in regard to the author himself.
When do you want to do that?
I don't know. Once I put some down, I'll message you guys. We'll have to figure out a date. I will say it's a pretty like fast, breezy read. So I suspect it's one of those I just need to sit down like for one night and probably power through.
I read it in 2 days. So
yeah, it's one of those like. Yeah, it really flies. I would love. That's one of my questions I want to ask is what's the total word count of the book? Because, like I said, you have these every chapter has at least one picture, pretty large picture, and then every a third of the lines, that's an exaggeration, are like 3 sentences or 3 words. And so it's like it's 230 pages, but word count wise, I have no idea what it is.
Well, I know
Probably less than you think.
I know he said it took him 5 drafts. I think he said 5 drafts. And I asked him.
Oh no, that's not all criticism of quality or editing. It's purely a like word count versus page count is like such a deceptive metric, and it's one of the things that really frustrates me when people write and they're like, "Oh man, I powered through X pages," and it's like, well, was it 90% dialogue? Was it 2% dialogue? What does that mean? It's such a amorphous term to say page.
Right.
Do you mean people writing, or like, can I log this in my Goodreads?
the consumer, the consumerization of it, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The consumer end, I understand it because all I have is the page. It's the writer, it's the WG new fag who's like asking like is writing 1 page a day good?
Only if you're in 5.5. So
yeah, exactly. Step it up. Where's the 2K words a day?
And it's legal sized paper, but you got to publish it that way.
Absolutely.
So it'll be completely unreadable.
Publisher Paris, no choice.
All right. Any last words, guys?
Cap?
I nutted 5 times. That's my highest possible score for a novel. So I give this one 5 nuts.
5 nuts out of 5, not bad.
5 nuts out of 5.
As a quick aside, I would like to say, you mentioned how breezy this is. Like we could talk about the construction of it is very complex, how he's trying to put this construction thing, right? But if you experience it purely straight, without any word selling or anything like that, it's purely just a fun book. You will laugh out loud. Tears will roll down your face reading this. This is one of the, like I said, funniest books in our scene in a long time. So even it's an extra kind of tip of the hat to how complex, for a fact it took about a lot of brain power thinking of how to construct this novel, a lot of the behind the gears, behind the screen kind of thing. But when you actually experience it as the consumer, as the participant, it just flows beautifully. It's very well crafted.
Yeah, and I feel like I've come across as slightly negative. I've been told I can come across that way, but I really enjoyed it. I would say it's one of those, if you're at all interested in the subject, is worth reading because it has that humor. It's there's not a manifesto peeking through the pages. It doesn't have that vibe where sometimes some things from the internet can feel like. And this does not feel like something from the internet. It feels like it's something from a time and a place. And yeah, it's authentic.
Yeah, it's exaltation, not manifesto. There's 2 different things. It's it's a more aestheticization than ideology than anything else.
Yeah, and just so relatable to me again. Public, just going through school and like those moments where you want to bust out laughing and you got because of some horrific shit and you're just not allowed to. Yeah, just super relatable. So okay, then we'll call it a cap there. We'll plan on doing a part 2. I know we mentioned before the Q&A. So if people want to post any questions in the comments to wherever this goes live, they can go ahead and add them there. Direct message us. We should have an email listed on there too. We'll include those questions whenever we do a Q&A with Adam about the book. Hopefully you pick up Mixtape Hyperborea or find a copy somewhere legally online to read along because, like we said, it's a really fun read. And it
is worth the shekels. It's worth the shekels.
Yeah, I like the physical copy personally because the images are they're not high res, but that's kind of the part of the charm in terms of each chapter level.
It's the whole point. Yeah, the experiencing the analog thing within itself adds to the experience immensely.
Yeah, 100%. I'm gonna be throwing it into let's just say I'm gonna be sharing it once I'm done with it too, which I think is always a good thing to do with independent stuff. So all right, let's wrap it there. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again next time.
Bye.
Holla.